I was pretty young, but I definitely remember this gorgeous, fascinating man preparing for a fight, talking to the press, saying, "I'm so big and strong, you're not going to believe what you see, because I'm going to dance, and I'm going to dance, and I'm going to dance." Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, the hand can't hit what the eye can't see. With charisma, courage, and power, he took the boxing stage and the world stage. I don't like boxing, but it's fascinating, and because I don't like what it makes the men do to each other, but there's so much to learn from the boxing world. Here is some of the story of Cassius Clay, the man who at 22 years of age converted to Islam and changed his name to Muhammad Ali. Born in '42 in Louisville, Kentucky, like other black kids, Cassius used caution when drifting from his neighborhood. Walking amongst small brick bungalows in the white neighborhood, young Cassius would hear the N word directed at him. N, full word, go home. N, go home. Unfortunately, Cassius would not always expect much consolation at home, where his father drank heavily, often lashing out verbally, sometimes physically. When he was 12, his bike was stolen by other kids in the neighborhood. Angry and wanting revenge, he went to that local gym where a man instructed kids to box. And in the gym, he learned to defend himself and box. And very soon, people realized that Cassius Clay was an amazing physical athlete with endless potential. He grew up inside the heating of the civil rights cauldron and crises. In 1955, at the age of 14, Emmett Till, a black Chicago youth, was visiting his family in Mississippi. Accustomed to somewhat more socially integrated norms in the North, Emmett Till supposedly flirted with a white woman in a store. 3 days later, a group of white men kidnapped, tortured, and murdered 14-year-old Emmett Till. Those men who did it were eventually arrested, tried, and found not guilty in a bogus trial. And at the time of the murder, well, Emmett Till was 1 year older than Cassius Clay. And Emmett Till's story was permanently seared into Cassius Clay's consciousness. Always kept that with him, as is true with many people, including in this room. In this context, young Cassius entered the world of boxing, a sport which has always been dominated by racial dynamics. As Remnick says, in America, boxing came straight out of slavery, where the owners pitted slave against slave for brutal, sometimes deadly entertainment. In Clay's time, all the blacks in the sport were keenly aware of the history, which includes 1910, when Jack Johnson became the first black champion in America. If you don't know this story, listen to this part closely and look into it more, because I could preach a whole sermon on this. When Johnson won the boxing title in 1910, race riots broke out across cities in America to the scale not seen again to the 60s. And the backlash against black people, including Jack Johnson, was vicious. It's a national shame, embarrassment, at least. It's not even a good word. It's not enough. So Cassius Clay had this in him. He knew if you're going to go towards the top, there's a lot of cost and a lot of risk. You could hide in your neighborhood and never do anything, or you could follow your gift and become a boxer, but there's a lot of risk because you are a black man. In 1962, when Cassius Clay was 22 years old and entering the top boxing ranks, Sonny Liston, a black fighter whose hometown was Philadelphia, won the boxing crown. Liston was emotionally crushed when Philadelphia leaders made no public effort to celebrate his victory. If he was white, there is zero doubt it would have been very different. The press this is 62, frequently at that time referred to Liston as the ape and the beast. Joe Frazier, also a Philly, eventually also won the title. And yet this is the city, this is a complicated one, but it really, really is frustrating. This is the city where decades later we erected a statue to a white fictitious fighter, Rocky. The guy doesn't exist except in a film. But we got, at least, I think there's another black champ from Philly, but there's 2 black champs from Philly. We got a statue of the white movie character in front of the museum. As our UU religious movement examines and supports the Black Lives Matter campaign, it's helpful to reflect upon the life of the man the world came to know as Ali. And the context is critical of his life. Got to keep in mind where he came from and what he was dealing with. And in order to explore Muhammad Ali, we must honestly include some of the ways he himself intensified and created problems for himself and others. Ali taunted opponents. Sometimes it was funny, sometimes it was cruel. He say, chump, big bear, ugly, ugly, you're ugly. But he said, I'm harassing guys to get in their brain. A lot of times it was the black guys, sometimes it was white. He would call some fighters who he didn't agree with their politics Uncle Tom in the ring in a very, it was intense. It was intense. He taunted. Ali joined the Nation of Islam, a radical group of Muslims at that time led by Elijah Muhammad, who preached odd, cosmologically invented and often contorted forms of Islam. At times, the teachings were brutally dogmatic. Perhaps the worst example of Muhammad Ali supporting such teachings when Ali said people participating in interracial sex should be killed. He said this on record multiple times to the press. People participating in interracial sex should be killed. There's a whole long story of Ali and Malcolm X. They were dear, tight friends and brothers for a number of years. And it's one of the most fascinating friendships in American history that I know of. But when Malcolm X became popular and powerful, he also began to publicly criticize some of the teachings of Elijah Muhammad, like the one I just mentioned. Malcolm had gone to Africa and expanded and softened his view of Islam. And Elijah Muhammad turned on Malcolm X, expelled him, publicly threatened him. At this time, Ali was pressured, stay with Elijah Muhammad, and he did. And eventually Malcolm X was murdered, almost 100% certain by the Nation of Islam. And Ali did not condemn the murder, and he never expressed sadness for Malcolm's death. It's tough. The context is intense. The last one I have to name is in '74, Ali and George Foreman went to Zaire for a very fascinating event called the Rumble in the Jungle, which I'll talk about in a moment. But they were each paid $5 million to fight. And in many ways, a key thing that was happening is Mobutu Sese Seko, a brutal, bloody dictator, was running a PR campaign by having this fight come to Zaire, and they essentially were his PR agents. They fought in a stadium that he used to torture dissidents under the stage. It's tough stuff. So, we can't review any human being's life without finding shortcomings. I could tell you about 5-10 hours of mine in summary, and that's how humans are. And Muhammad Ali's challenges, like many's, were tied to positive. His challenges were tied to capacities of tremendous innovation, courage, and inspiration. Real deal positive energy. During the 50s and 60s, many people, including Dr. King and President Kennedy, saw Ali's segregationist ideas as hurtful. And that's an interesting conversation, but what I'm saying today is, and once again, let's think of today in Black Lives Matter. We must credit Ali at that time as a courageous truth teller. Courageous truth teller. He named the tension every black person faced since coming to these shores in bondage. Ali said, and remember Emmett Till, Ali said, I'm not going to get killed trying to force myself on people who don't want me. I like my life. Integration is wrong. The white people don't want integration. I don't believe in forcing it. That's a conversation he's having courageously at the public level. In '62, James Baldwin wrote a brilliant book, The Fire Next Time. In those writings, Baldwin identified the Nation of Islam not as a particularly effective political group, but as a symptom of continued oppression and a warning that limited change in society would lead to conflagration. Ali was saying the same thing all the time. He let people know things have to change. And you could watch him and see he, like everyone else, didn't exactly know the perfect solution, but he was trying. Mistakes were made, advances were made. Ali himself said that a person who believes the same thing at the age of 50 as he believed at 20 has wasted 30 years. Amen. Can I get an amen? Ali, just like Malcolm X, was constantly learning, testing his own hypotheses about moral and spiritual values. He was changing and growing, especially when he developed Parkinson's. He became a beautiful, international, spiritual leader. He constantly developed relationships of care with people, and many of them with whom he'd had previous antagonisms. Ali was a poet, not only as a way to psych himself up for the violent, scary sport, but as a poet, Ali relished bringing smiles to people whose lives otherwise involved misery. He wrote and practiced his poems in private, took a lot of pride in that, and then he would quickly rap them out as if improvising. Many have said that Tupac, Snoop Dogg, a lot of people look to Ali. I wrestled with alligators, I tussled with a whale, I done handcuff lightning, and I thrown thunder in jail. He would just boom, boom, boom. He always had a line. Watch video, look him up on YouTube and just watch his poetry. It's fascinating to watch him rap out his poetry. And he brought joy to people, and he knew it. He was talented. He met the Beatles more than once. And in the 60s, many people like to call Ali the fifth Beatle. David Remnick wrote, "The fighter from Louisville and the band from Liverpool were part of the enormous changes happening socially, economically, artistically, and politically." And Remnick says, more accurate than saying the Beatles and Ali were part of it is to say they were leading it. Now, Ali, he would crow. I was just watching film of him all week. He just had a way of talking that was so unique. After he defeated Sonny Liston for the championship, which all the press had said he was going to lose, he just got up on the rope and said, "I'm the greatest. I'm the greatest thing that ever lived. I'm the king of the world. I'm the king of the world." And although these words were arrogant, but it's even tricky to say what that is in the context. They were arrogant. It's also true that generations, ever since, of African Americans and people around the world, people of Zaire, forever say, he brought them self-pride. He instilled in them a way to believe in themselves that the systematic oppression of racism had taken away. And you can read comments about this that reflect this by James Baldwin, Maya Angelou, James Brown the singer, and James Brown the running back, both awesome guys, garbage men, electricians, professors, on and on. Ali instilled self-pride in a people that were struggling without enough. He knew the problems coming from the press and public too often inaccurately painting all Muslims as the same. Sounds similar to something you've experienced lately. And although Ali did contribute to these problems at times, he also developed into a courageous leader working against Islamophobia. He said, "Black Muslims is a press phrase. It's not a legitimate name. The real name is Islam, and that means peace. Islam means peace. I am one of 750 Muslims. I'm a good person. I love white people. I like my own people, and we can live together without infringing on each other." A little bit of change there. It's changing. In '66, Ali was drafted and made one of the biggest decisions of his life. He refused to serve in the military due to his Islamic faith. He was arrested and barred from boxing for over 3 years. Some say it cost him $10 million in 1960s money. So one did not have to agree with him to know that he was a principled leader, because they offered him a lot of little deals to sidestep it, make a little compromise, serve this way, keep boxing. No, he said, Ali asked in the press, "Why should they ask me to put on a uniform and go 10,000 miles from home and drop bombs and bullets on brown people in Vietnam, while so-called Negro people in Louisville are treated like dogs and denied human rights?" Bertrand Russell from England became friends. He got a lot of reaction, and this stance polarized Ali for the rest of his life. This stance infuriated many and drew admiration and praise from many others. The split was felt everywhere from any time he would enter the Bronx or Yankee Stadium. It was felt in this church. That split was very alive in this church. Through all the sports, business, religious, and geopolitics, Ali believed in true friendships. Over all his life, underneath all the racial segregation talk, the crazy braggadocio, he came to care and have compassion for friendship. The only thing he cared about more was God. He loved God, especially after he couldn't fight and had Parkinson's. Here's a poem which he liked to recite that he wrote. "Friendship is a priceless gift that cannot be bought nor sold, but its value is far greater than a mountain made of gold. For gold is cold and lifeless. It can neither see nor hear. In time of trouble, it's powerless to cheer. So when you ask God for a gift, be grateful when he sends, not diamonds, gold, nor riches, but love of real, true friends." When they went to Africa, it was a big deal. He began to develop relationships between U.S. folks and folks in Zaire and Africa. He brought B.B. King and James Brown. They were all part of his show. And they mixed music, dance, and poetry in making cross-continental friendships that had been lost in many ways since slavery, and empowered people to dream new ways. Don King, the talented, crazy promoter of the event, said, "We blacks left Africa in shackles and chains, and we've come back now in an aura of glory and splendor. And we're coming as champions with a great sense of unity with our brothers and sisters in Africa." During that trip, known as Rumble in the Jungle, Ali spoke in ways that could easily represent the Black Lives Matter mission so many of us are dedicated to today. Ali said he was fighting for the prestige of people back home. He said, "I'm fighting for poor blacks sleeping on concrete floors in Cincinnati. I'm fighting for poor blacks who don't have enough to eat in St. Louis. I'm fighting for the prostitutes and the dope heads, and I'm fighting for black people who don't know their own history. Today's complicated and nuanced political social context actually provides a lens through which we can better understand the fast-paced, changing, crazy 60s. How folks like Muhammad Ali lived through those times instruct us. Today, we have Trayvon Martin and Eric Garner's deaths to learn from. We have 32,000 gun deaths a year. Too often police use excessive force disproportionately against people of color. And we have a large majority of police officers working hard in dangerous environments, deserving respect and support. Today we have a brutal gap between the richest and everyone else. We have the most people in prison of any country in the world. Disproportionately suffering are the people of color, and we have many failing school systems. I know we can bend the world to our will for more peace and justice. I know we can. And I know in the depths of my heart there are so many people, brown, black, white, red and blue politically, deeply yearning to make things better. No doubt. People want to make it better. Let us remember Muhammad Ali's courage, willingness to sacrifice and change in order to realize dreams. In closing, let us hear Ali's words. Don't count the days, make the days count. And remember, service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. Blessings be. Amen.